In this chapter, we will be studying a whale jump, which is a typical scenario, and it includes a lot of details based on the final shape we want to achieve from this jump. But basically it can vary based on the scenario and the camera view, and in this case here we have very specific kind of jump and a look which is we need to achieve. And just to look at the animation before anything, our whale is jumping very high. This is not realistic jump because he doesn't usually jump that high, maybe in some cases, but he will land violently near the camera. As you can see here, this is our camera. So again, this is his jump. He will just be a little in the air, then he will come down to jump to splash near the camera. So a lot of details here, and we want to make sure that we have very specific look, and we will study some certain references to understand what is the difference between whale jump, other whales jump, and smaller creature jump such as shark jump, which is a little different. So for that we have to mention that we created another course under the same series, which is Big Water at VFXTREME, and in that course we have more than 7.5 hours studying how a whale will jump, but mainly we have this scenario as you can see here, and we were studying how the whale gonna do very specific water reaction during its jump. Here's the water alone. As you can see, we have enough detail in the water before even we add the foam and the splashes. Here's the mist, and it's contained within certain border. Here's a side view. We can see everything together here. As you can see, we have all the elements, and it's very specific jump. The thing about this jump is that we already, as you saw, we have enough details in the mesh itself. So the water body here should create enough details before we start generating the foam and the splashes from the water body, and that's very critical to take in consideration. Now if we don't want to depend on the water body to create this kind of details or to create the kind of reaction we have from splash and foam, that's because we are seeking certain shape for the foam and the white water reaction that should be taken in consideration at the beginning of how we simulate everything. But again, we are producing the same scenario you saw here in the same jump, the same whale, everything, but for VFXTREME. Although we have a lot of details here, but we can create actually even nicer render for the foam itself in VFXTREME. This was rendered using Krakatoa and the water using V-Ray. Now if you see here, it's a point based render. It's good and the shape of everything seems realistic, but again we can achieve better than that using VFXTREME shaders because it's customized more. Now let's look at a few things before we start our scenario here. So as you notice here, we have what I mentioned, the reaction of the water. Here we have enough details, fine details coming out of the water before we start generating all the other passes, and that alone can work very well if we are studying a shark jump, because the shark jump mostly is depending on how the water itself reacts. There is no much involvement of the foam or the splashes, the white water. In that scenario, we really create most of the reaction and even the coloring for the basic mesh using the velocity pass as we pass some of its information, the velocity here in the main body water, into the shader itself to make it white at the edges. Here it's not passed, it's just transparent more whenever we have splashes, but in that scenario, yeah, we will make sure that we have white water if we are studying a shark jump. In this scenario, no, we don't need to do that, because most of this will be covered after all with the white water, and the white water will take care of whitening this area of water like this. So we don't really care about all the details. The only use for the details in the water is that it creates exactly the shape of the white water we need after all. And just to understand that again, I have certain shots of that course which is created for Phonics FD, and we will be releasing that soon. But here is a small preview of how the water itself, without any foam or any splashes, is acting. As you can see, we have the whale jumping, and there is a big reaction for the water. Of course, we can just control how this is big or small by changing the motion factor of the whale itself, interaction between the whale and the water, as well as two other factors, the scale of the scene and the timing. So this is a good example of a shark jump if we will not add any white particles. We'll depend on this alone, and we will shade it right, because all the details we need to see here, even for the waves and the stormy water, is actually there. We can see all the details we need. But if we will go and think of this as a bigger body like whale, we need to start approaching other kind of reaction or look for the splashes. Let me just share some references here. Here in this video on YouTube, you can just see some of the shark jumps, and as you can see, there is no presence for actual white water. It's what we see here is the actual water body, but it's so fine, and we have a lot of details in the mesh itself, and it's white, so it's getting this color, the white color. Usually we fake this when we create something white enough using the foam, but it is not the case usually when we have shark, and that's very close to what we saw here in this scenario, because we have fine details and we have a lot of details in the mesh itself. Now, because we are studying the whale, which is big enough, we will see some of other examples of the whale jump. As you can see here, we have explosion, water explosion, and in the water explosion there is a very specific way of approaching or generating the foam itself, because it's very white, it's accumulating, so it has certain, here of course it has colors because it's explosion, it's not just purely produced by a whale jump, it's not just white, but it has very specific way, it lands very slow, it has a mist which is affected by the wind, other things, but this is exactly what we are talking about. The shape here, it has very specific shape. This is the kind of approach we want to have here in our whale. It's not the kind of splashes we saw with real flow and which we are trying to create in our other course. For this course we have very customized shape. The scenario here will work very fine if you want to create something like that for explosion, underwater explosion, or like rocket launching from underwater and all these kinds of reactions. So if we will look at the typical whale jump, we can see that actually it's white water, and we can go and produce everything using the dots, just dots, points. We don't even to think about bubbles or just a water body like big balls of waters. And you will see it clearly when he is landing. It's like the reference we show in reflow, and we can do all this using just point rendering in Phoenix FD shader. That's it. So some images maybe will give you an idea about how we are trying to approach this using Phoenix FD from the next course I will share now. This is one of them. As you can see here, we see only the splashes, and I had the whale colored by black. As you can see, it looks like it has a volume and everything with reflection, refraction also, but actually it's all points. We don't need to go and render everything using spheres or balls or bubbles or cylinders as we have in the shader itself. Those options are available, but we can get away with something very fast using points. As you can see here, this is another frame, and we have everything really looking like the look we are seeking. It's not the explosion look, the one we shared as a reference, but here we can see that all the details we need, including even some other particles here, is achieved using points. That's it. So in our scenario here, the look is exactly like this one, this reference. Just to be clear about it, it's about like this reference. We are seeking something similar to this reference, which works for all kind of explosion, and it will work very well here for the whale jump. So after just seeing all these examples, we need to understand that few changes here gonna affect everything for us. So in our scenario, because the whale is jumping near the camera, we don't need really to take care of anything produced here. And actually the water body, I don't want the water body to reach here. So I don't care if this will end here or even here, because most of the water are gonna react or jump here. And the other things which gonna continue its movement up are just the white water, which can go outside of the container as we saw before. So to make sure that all our movement or our reaction is produced by the white water and triggered by the water itself, we can shallow the water as much as we want. So in this scenario, I will just bring the water to 8. Just 8% of the initial fill up is 8%. It's like here, just here. It's very shallow water, but that will be enough for us to achieve the look we are seeking for sure. And also we will be generating a huge amount of foam, as you can see here. And what I will do is that I will start increasing or animating the foam as I am approaching this side. So after the whale is jumping, we will produce certain amount of foam, but when the whale is landing here near the camera, I need to create more foam even. So I can get away with few amount of foam here, but it's advised to create more here because I want to cover the screen with foam or splashes. So I can animate those, but let's just choose some values and start filling our parameters here. In this scenario also, I don't need to animate the container at all. The lights I have here are very simple, and we will look at that also, but I already created these lights in previous section, so we will have a look at those two for sure. But now let's go to the grid itself and study why it is like that. So if you look at the top view, we will see that the whale is jumping here, and we are accounting for some of the foam to be on the both sides, but it's already a lot of space here and here for that. Let's see how it will land. It's landing like this, so we have to account for that also. That's why we have it big enough to contain all the possible water from all sides. No need to animate domain because there's no actual animation, a big distance for the whale itself. It's just a local, almost local jump. Now let's go and create some few parameters here. So we have these, and they are the dimensions here. We will increase this later, which is the cell size, decrease it. So we increase the resolution or the amount of voxels. 1,800,000 voxels now is good for testing. Always, as a rule, don't make it very low and don't make it very high when you test things. There are a few things which you will not see when you are low, and even mid scale you have to expect to see it when you are in a higher resolution. And there are a lot of things which you will see, but it will take a lot of time if you produce with a very high resolution. So it's very advised to be in the middle, and this is very low. We can get away with this because I know the result, but let's go and make sure to have it open. We don't need more than that. I don't think we need to activate adaptive grid, because we will use all the space we have here. So let's go down. I would simulate the air effect here because I want to create some mist, but let's study all the other elements like splash and foam and see how that will be handy later. So motion interior, we explained that before. We will keep it 1, although our container is not moving, but this is essential when our container is moving. So just leave it as it is. Gravity fill up, I just will put few amount of water. The reason for that is that I will not depend much on the water movement more than I will depend on the splash and the foam, and that will create certain kind of a reaction which we already explained, which is this kind of reaction. It's vertical, and we needed to be having these details as here, maybe. Yes, this kind of explosion. It's very vertical, it's not spreaded a lot in the base, and it will land almost also vertically. So let's continue. Everything here as it is, we don't need to really change much here. We can activate wetting to make sure that we have a material here later, which gonna control which are the parts of the whale gonna dry after him going out of the water. But I don't think that's necessary here, because the whale is jumping in a few seconds and landing in a few seconds, means that it will not dry. So I don't think this will be very practical here, so we don't need to waste our time studying that. Foam, I will activate foam here, and it's exactly important here. It's different from other scenarios. What I mean about that is that usually, and I mentioned that most of the tutorials I saw, it depends on the foam created by the splash from here. That's good, it works and it's realistic, but there are a huge amount of foam which is created before the splash happen, which is actually the bubbles before any splash is created. It comes out with the whale jumping from under the water, and this is the foam, and it will help a lot of producing a huge amount of foam. This is when you have a lot of foam and you simulate a lot of foam, you have to depend on this option. And also it helps a lot of creating certain kind of sliding foam when the whale is coming out slowly, and a certain look. So that is essential if we want to get the look we mentioned before. So I can just leave these as they are and start increasing and decreasing and going. Of course, you can animate this factor so you have more foam or less foam because it's animatable. Lifespan, I will just leave it as it is. Of course, if you wanted to live outside the container for a longer time, you can just increase this. For the size, for this scene, I know because I have the scale here and it's very specific. I know exactly the size of the foam. For now, I can just leave it as it is and I can change it on the foam shader, but I prefer always to have something which is almost near the final result here. So I will just go to this number, which is almost 0.01, and for other things here I don't need to change anything. I don't care really much here about the distribution because most of my foam can be outside of the water. For the dynamic, usually this is 100. I will just bring it to 0 because I don't need to create this interaction. I don't have very close-up scenes, and I don't need to create this. I would say mid-scale and small-scale water will require to have B2B interaction. It will add a factor for the realism of how everything is interacting with each other. But until now, I don't think we need it. And if your size, the particle size is big, and you have interaction of certain value, and you didn't know exactly, how to set up both these, you will have explosive result. So I will just keep it 0. For the rising speed, 0.2 and 2 meter. You have to understand this. I mentioned before, I explained before, the rising work for the bubbles basically, and it's for the foam, because the foam is the bubbles, and it works underwater, means it works only for the foam inside the water body, not outside the water, and it defines the buoyancy and the force which pushes all the bubbles, the water, because it's made of air above to reach the surface of the water. This is the speed. And here is the opposite. It works only outside of the water, and it defines how slow or fast the water gonna drop after it reach certain height. So if I will slow this, or if I will bring this down, means my water gonna be stacking a lot in the air, and sometimes because it's so slow, it will slow the water so much, maybe sometimes it will freeze, as we may see in our tutorial here. So increasing this will make sure that our water will go up and go faster when it's going down. Sticky foam, again, this, if you want your foam to stick with whale body, you can increase this. Sometimes you will use it, but if you want to use it, you need to make sure that you have B2B interaction. Now for the leg surface, this defines how the foam is reacting or stacking with the water surface. So I will not use it now, because my camera, my view is just defining certain kind of reaction, which is not from top view. I don't really need to change this. For the pattern is the pattern of the foam, which usually we see when we are looking from above. Here it doesn't have any difference. If you change this, you can just put it on any value, and if you like it, that's good. If you don't, just change it. It defines the pattern. As you can see, small circles or certain shapes of the foam when it's left after it's created. For the splashes, I can leave these again as they are, and we will notice that we need to just reduce the threshold maybe, and the amount, because I want to create a huge amount of particles, splash particles, to create the effect we mentioned. So again, let's go down here by free fly. Again, if you wanna just know what it is, it works well for the waterfall. It will allow some of the drop of water, if it's isolated, like we are talking about a particle from the water body, if it's isolated certain amount of time, to be converted into splashes. But for now, we don't need to do that. We're gonna keep everything as it is, so I will just don't use it. And for the base volume, we have it here, if you notice, in the foam also, and we have it also here in the mist. This is if you want to create the splash and the foam from certain area. And just to mention again, it's extremely important to understand the relationship between the 3 particle system. So the mist is actually another kind of splash, and we will try in this tutorial to understand the relationship between the two. So I will just keep this 0, and I will just activate the splashes now. No need to create foam from splash. Maybe we'll add a little, and we'll see how that will behave with us. So let me just deactivate the foam now and depend only on the foam created by the splashes to see if that will be enough for us. Other parameters here we will change ongoing, but again, for the splash air drag, it's how the air gonna drag the movement of the splashes. If you want to slow them down in a big scale, sometimes you need to really control these, because it will create certain kind of look and how they will be like simulating the scale as much as the particles are slowing when they are after the creation. They will create a sense of scale, which is important. Here it's actually 3, not 30, but the default, but we can change it. It's the same thing for the mist. Other than that, we can define the time or the age for the splashes. Now to add here, I always prefer to include in the list, not to exclude what is not there. So I will include the whale itself, and maybe I will include also its teeth, because we have a whale teeth, and during its jump, maybe when it's landing here, we can see the teeth. Just you can add them, and the teeth here are group, as you notice, are group. Already Phonics will understand that this is individual bodies, so, and they will treat them based on that. So let's go down, and this is the output. Let's put the output in a certain folder. We can name it whatever we want, so I will name it test, and usually you can define the amount of digits beside it by just adding hashtag as much as you want. So now I know that the first frame will be 0000 and 0001, and that's it. So it's just define how much digits I have here. That's good. So save, and I can go down also and try to have the mesh activated, but for now I don't need to do much about that. For the preview, I can make this like 2 because I want to see enough particles. I will activate the liquid, the splashes, and the foam, so I see everything during the simulation. I will change the foam here to yellow, so I recognize it well, and I will leave everything else as it is. And let's start our first simulation, see how it will look, and watch the numbers of particles, because that's extremely important, and I have been talking about it in the previous sections and chapters here. So the whole simulation should stay until here, but we will simulate just a few frames because I don't need to see everything happening after this. So I'll just keep it to 6150, and just remember I untick this and I define the time for the simulation. That's how you exactly define the time of the simulation. From here to here, I don't need to simulate from the beginning or anything. This is the way. So that's good. Let's start simulating and see some results. I will simulate and I will come back to you. Now I have some frames. As you can see, I don't have any foam, and the problem is that I was having this not activated. You have to activate it, and to put here 0 if you don't want to create foam from here, but in order to have a foam created here, you need at least to activate it here. So I will just resimulate again and see. So now we have our we have our simulation going, but I can say that we have to do some changes. So before we continue, we can just stop and see what we have. Let me just go to here and close all the roulets and go to preview and decrease this to 0 to see exactly what kind of effect we have. So now we have this kind of reaction, which is good. I think it's exactly what we want, but we don't have enough particles. So at the beginning, let's analyze everything by just removing the splash and the foam and see the reaction of the water itself. It's nice, it's sliding with the wheel movement, and some of them is dropped down after he moves, and still until now we have some water going down, and that's good. Let's just remove also the foam. Now that's logical more. So we have this, and that's very nice, especially in the mouth, because amount of it will be inside the mouth, then it will drop later. That will be generating some splashes, because as much as it has certain kind of speed, it will be regenerating splashes. So the foam itself, let me just go and deactivate the liquid. I will see just the foam, which is just few amount because we generated the foam from the splashes. and the foam, as you notice, is just down. It doesn't contribute anything in the big splashes. Now let's again go to splashes and the foam, deactivate the foam. These are the splashes and they are forming the exact kind of white water shape we need. It has the edges, it's vertical, and it's dropping down in the same way we want them to go down, but they are slow. So what we can do here is that we can, to speed up their movement, because we will create even foam later, we can do two things. One, we can drop this less, so there is less drag for its movement, and at the same time here for the foam, we will need, when we create the foam, to increase this to speed up their going down. And also for the mist, we will do the same by dropping this number to make sure that they are dropping down very fast. Now from this we have already idea about the shape of the water explosion, and as you can see here we have some numbers. Also we can use these numbers to understand how is everything happening. Let's go to this frame as example and see the amount of water. It's 148,000. The foam is so few, it's just almost 250, 260, but we have a huge amount of splashes, which is 10,000. Still, these two numbers are extremely low based on the water. Again, the equation says x number, and x by 2 means x on 2 divided by 2. And what I mean is that if this is 150, this should be 70,000, 75,000, almost. This is the ideal number, or more. And this should be at least 35,000, and this should be at least 15,000 to 17. This is the least amount of numbers, so I have really a low amount of foam and splashes, and that do based on the numbers I'm having here. So I need to reduce the threshold to allow more particles to be created, and again here the same. But the main body water movement is so good, and I think this is a very good starting point before we continue. Now I will add to this some foam here. I can increase the foam here, but again, because it's not realistic to simulate everything without accounting for the bubbles down, the whale is moving very fast and he will create this kind of foam, so I prefer to add some foams here. I will add a good amount of foam here, let's say 2.5, and that's good. Then I will go with the threshold even below. Let's go 0. maybe 2 and see if that will work. For the live, I may increase this. So outside I want them to live, you can put any number. Let's put 5. That's good. But over here and increase this number, we can go, let's put 10. That will ensure that they will be not deleted even if they will move very slow. For the size, I will leave it as it is. Everything is here as it is. And for here, the falling speed, I think at least even we have rising speed of 0.2, we can have the falling speed 3 or 4 or even 5 to make sure that they are falling in a higher speed than this, because if you just see how this is the splash, of course we are not seeing here the foam, but I expect it should be faster based on the scene scale. So I just leave it like this. The percent between the equation between the two is that this should be 10% of this, so I can say 0.4, but I don't care really for the water, for the foam inside the water. So that's it for here. And for the splashes, the numbers are good, but I think I will need to increase the amount of splashes. So let's say 30, and here I can reduce it to, let's say 7 or 5, and see how it will look before we go and increase the amount of the total amount of particles. I will keep it this as it is because there are some foam which is generated from the splashes. Whenever the splash particle will be fast enough, or will interact with the water, I needed to create some foam. So it's always a good idea to add some here. Sometimes you don't need it based on the scene, but I will add it. Now also I can add a mist, and for the mist all I need to do is to add just a little, maybe 0.2, and see how that will form that final amount of particles. And maybe I will decrease this because I want it to move freely, and for these I will just increase this because I want it to live more, the splashes. That's it. Now for the liquid, like, we will study this, and that's extremely important, but let's just start and do one simulation, and I will come back after the simulation is done. So let's run the simulation, and again the simulation is running really fast based on the steps per frame. The scale of the scene here is typical. It's perfect for you if you wanna put just your creature in the scene and it will work. It's magical because the scale of the scene is good and right, and this is very critical. So when you have the scene scale right and the timing right and the movement of your creature is similar to the speed of your creature is similar to my creature here, you will have a simulation time which is very fast, because you will do everything based on one step, and that's it. Let's continue and I will come back. Now we are done from the simulation. Only thing I did is that I dropped the foam amount to 1 just for testing because it became huge. And let's see what we have here so we understand how everything is acting. And now I will go down just to make sure I turn on certain particles. So I will just say 0, so we are displaying all the particles, and I will go just to see the liquid itself. Now as you can see, the liquid is doing fine, and it's totally following the body movement, so I don't have actually splash from the water itself. It doesn't go right or left. I have it just like almost sticking to the whale body. That's because I don't have a lot of water here. I don't have a body of water. The thickness here is so shallow, so as you can see it's just 8%. It's nothing. So I'm not allowing the water to really react much. And actually what I can do also to make sure that this is happening when I increase the resolution of the water is to go here to the motion velocity effect and just drop it to 0.8. That will make sure also that everything gonna be the same when I start simulating with a big amount of particles. Now everything is cool before the whale. Now again here I don't have even any kind of reaction. Now it's almost done, and that shows that I don't have much of the interaction between the whale and the water for a lot of reasons. One of them is that the speed of the whale is very low now, so I don't assume that there will be an interaction. Now I have another interaction, and it's clear here, and you can see it even here, and the whale is creating this kind of splash. If you look at it from here, we'll see it. If you look at it from here, maybe I will need to look at it from perspective by going to Z perspective, and I will increase this so we can see it here. It's not much, so I just simulated until here, and it's not much. We need actually to increase the reaction here. Based on the camera I should see some splashes, but again this is the body of the water. The actual splash is foam and splash, which is the white particles. So what I can do is that I can go down and let's just hide the liquid and activate the splashes. Let's see the splashes. Now the splashes are good because they are filling the screen, and this is what I want to end my frame with. Let's see at the beginning. At the beginning they are almost the same as we witnessed them before. They are not much, and they are forming this kind of very vertical shape of particles. Again, as you can see, they are not jumping so much higher than what we want, and actually they start dropping fast. That's of course controllable using the drag here. I can just decrease it and have better reaction, or just they will be like speeding up more. Of course, there's this factor which is initial velocity multiplier, which if we increase it more than 1, they will be faster than the original. Every one of them is created by one particle of the water body. So if we increase this more than 1, it means that we want it to be faster, but this is not realistic. I prefer not to use it. So now look at it, everything is dropping down. That's cool, but look at the behavior. Everything is this is not normal. We should have these done now, down actually, except if we will consider this as a mist. The mist stuck in the air more time. Now let's see the particles here. They are good because now I consider our work done. Now let's see the foam. By going here, and I will hide the splashes, and I will just activate the foam. The foam amount is huge just by doing these two changes, which I did here, just by changing this into 1, and it was 0.2 here, and of course I need to increase this later. But look at the amount of foam. Now the whole amount of particles I have was almost 150 for the water body. If I will start increasing or walking here, this is the foam. As you can see, the foam is shaping almost the shapes we have or we saw in the reference video, and we have already 5 to 6 millions now, and that's good. It's a huge number, but I don't mind. And just remember one important thing. Now when I increase the liquid particles amount to several millions, like 9 millions, it doesn't mean that I'm multiplying the foam particles, the result here, by the same amount. It's actually going to be around this. It's not changing much by changing the liquid amount. Of course it will increase, but not that much. So if it's like 9 millions now or 8 millions, I'll expect it to be 10 to 12 millions, but not like if this will jump 20 times, this will jump 20 times at all. So these numbers are realistic. Splash will change more, but again, look at the splash and the mist. The mist is already much more than I want because it's almost as the splashes. Splashes are less than I want, but because everything here is covered by the foam, I would say the foam amount is good. I don't need to increase those. So now we see everything's good. I may need to increase the amount of foam again. They are here still while the whale is there. Let's jump to another frame and see everything is down. So it's acting really well based on the drag force and velocity. And if I will go here, I see that this is exactly the reaction I want from the foam. So they are really filling the screen and they will continue going up. Of course, I can allow them to go up more by going to the foam and actually just increase in this number. If I will increase it, that will be, they will have less drag and they will be moving up a little, but they will drop faster also. So just based on these numbers and going here to finally here to 6 million, 7 millions I have almost here, and here at the beginning I almost have 8 millions, which is good. And I think this gives me an idea about how everything can happen. And look here is exactly what I want. It's vertical. I don't need to limit it right or left to use any kind of like a controller just to control the foam movement. And based on this, I know now that I will increase the numbers a little or change the numbers a little. Now 8 millions is good, but I prefer to go really above this number, because when I render, especially when the particles are in front of the screen, I would need more particles. This is good. In the final result, I may go here and change this to almost 2.5 as I put it before. So that's good. now, and I think we have the numbers we want. If again you want to do something here, go to the mist and decrease this number to 0.1 because it's already as much as the splashes. And for the splashes, although I increased this to 30, we can do two things. One of them is that we can decrease this into 6 or 5. That will increase the amount of splashes. And here we can do another thing, which we can increase this to 40 or 50, and we can increase the splashes. But again, it's just you can try that. Now let's display the last thing which I didn't do, which is the mist. So I will hide the foam and I will display the mist. If you see here, I may color the mist with a different color. Let's go to greenish and let's display it here, and let's display also the splashes. As you can see, it's exactly following the splashes, but two things we have to just to compare between the two to understand what is the mist. First, the mist is faster than splash in general. They are ahead. Why is that? Actually, they are not ahead. These particles, the green particles, the mist, are originally splash particles which converted into mist because they met certain limits, speed. It's like if you drop a water and this water will gonna speed because it's just fractured to a small pieces of drop of waters, and almost it became like fluid, like not liquid, like a fluid. It's like air, spray, let's say. And that's exactly what's happening. So now, as you can see, they are following the same trajectory. They are falling down. Because usually I need them to stay more in the air, it's preferred I go here and in the splash, I can increase or decrease this drag. Means I will not allow them to speed much, or I need to keep them in the air more. But this to control this, mainly it's here in the foam, because the foam jumps also here, and if you want to see it, display the foam with them. Let's see the foam now. It's covering everything, of course, but again, the foam is the main player here in this scenario. And what we can do is that we can go to foam and we can just increase this number or decrease it. If you decrease it, they will stuck more in the air. Now here it comes handy if you want to go to the dynamic and activate simulate air effect, because that will give it even more movement based on the air. Now I will not just activate it, you can test with that. Our result is already good. I want to explain two other concepts which are important. Let's go to 0 here, and I will resimulate over everything just to see without any foam. I don't need foam. I will just create just a splash. I don't even need to do any mist. Let's just bring mist to 0 and foam amount to 0, and I will study the liquid alike. What does it mean, liquid like? Liquid like is especially for the splashes, and it's not just only here. We have as example in Houdini and in real flow. You can choose in real flow as example between the splash to be dumb particles, which is just particles, random particles, which is not controlled by Navier-Stokes, which is the liquid equation or the liquid solver, or it's like any random particles. They don't even have interaction between each other, except if you want to do that, and between to have them really look like liquid. As much as you increase this number, they will look like liquid, bulky, or just react like liquid. If you decrease it, they will be like dumb particles. Let's test the two. I will bring this into 0.1 and I will simulate everything, but because actually I don't need to resimulate the liquid itself, it's already simulated. What I can do is that I can go to resimulate, and I don't want to simulate the foam again or wetting. All I need to simulate is splash. The mist is already deactivated, so in that term I am resimulating the splash, and we will have a message now when we run everything. Let's see, and let's run the simulation. Now we have this. Can start the resimulate. Please make sure the simulation is run with a velocity grid. So we didn't go and activate a velocity here in our output. We need to make sure that we have velocity here in the output. So because we didn't do that, the output doesn't have velocity, but there are some tricks to do that, which is there always a frame which has a velocity here, and you can find them during this just by going here. There are some frames which we can restore our liquids and continue our simulation. We will talk about that later. For now, I will just run another simulation and see if that will create whatever we want and show us just only what I'm caring to see is how the splash is acting. So before we do that, I will just show you how the splash look like. Deactivate this. I don't want even the liquid and neither the mist, only the splashes. So look at the splash. It has some kind of clumping and clustering, and it looks like liquid because it's actually acting like a liquid. Now let's run the simulation and see. I will just wait until the simulation is done and I will come back. I stopped the simulation here just to compare between this frame or this splash and the splash in the next frame. So this is the new splash, and if I jump one frame, this is the old one. And as you can see here, it's more compact, it doesn't spread more, it's not dumb particles. If you go back, it's more chaos. If you start from the beginning, you can see that it's liquid, but it's acting with a lot of gaps here. And if we compare this to the mist we had, of course there is no mist here, so I'm not having any mist, but if we compare it to the mist, it looks exactly like the mist before. Look here and here, it has more area or spread more. So I can go even to 0 and see how it look like, and I can do that, but I can go to 3 also just to make sure that I am testing when it's so liquid. And let's simulate this and come back. So I will stop the simulation here just to make sure that I can see it with this shape, which is 3. And if I will go a little here, this is when it was, this is 3, this is 0.1, and this is 1. So the difference between all of them is that this is compact, this is a lot chaotic and I would say dumb particles, and this is a lot liquidy than all of them. And as much as it's liquidy, it's clustered more and it's gathered more around each other. The number of particles is not different, you know, it's always the same, doesn't go like low or high, but in general little differences gonna happen. So that's why I would say if you wanna simulate mist, there is another way to simulate mist, which is always simulate everything in your liquid. After you finish, you will have the water body, and because you activated, you will go here and activate the velocity of the output. You will be able to use resimulation, and resimulation tab will allow you to re-update some of your particles. So you can just re-update or resimulate a splash. In some of the simulations I do more than 3 or 4 splashes. That means I simulate the water with the basic splash I have, and I can only put this as 1 as example here, 1, sometimes 3 based on the starting point. I'll create the first splash along with the mist, with everything. Then I may need to randomize this and create something different. So what I do is that I enable particle resimulation, and I redirect my directory here, put it somewhere else, and I just make sure that I keep at least the previous one, the previous simulation alone, and I resimulate a splash and I change this factor. Now I have another kind of splash which allows me to, after all, just import the two here, have them shaded, and render multiple layers of splashes. And usually when we simulate something very big, instead of simulating everything here and to have like 300 million particles, and which is not practical to have all this kind of particles in one scene, what you do in that, you render things in layers, and as much as you add the layers over each other in compositing, and that's wise, but you can always also render them all here. As you can do that, you are actually creating some kind of layers which gonna spare you the huge amount of one simulation and the variety, so you can create more than one kind of reaction for the liquid. It's so important. I would say the reference images we saw here, as example this one in the next course, it has a liquid in 3, so liquidity is 3, which has a liquid shape here, if you notice more. These particles, the other ones, are mist. So again, if we see another reference, we may understand this. This is acting like actually liquid. We don't have any liquid body here, it's just only the foam and the splash. So based on that, I know now what does it mean, this one, which is extremely important. I rarely find anyone who's using it. Just get to know that and to use it. Again, you can render more than one splash in the scene by just creating more than shader. So every shader, you will go here and this one as example, which I created that just here to start rendering and see the results. You just choose the splash, create another one, and choose splash, so you have another splash in the scene, and you start rendering everything. Now the other thing you have to account for when you do resimulation, you need to know that in the normal case here, without resimulation, we are simulating everything together. So we have the liquid, we have the splash, and we have the foam, and we have all kind of particles. When we simulate everything, they are actually all interacting with each other. Means that when the splash particle jumps here and maybe jumps back to the water body, it will convert into another particle in the water body and will blend again. Maybe it will be foam particles. So there's interaction between all of them. So the liquid is affecting the shape of the splash, and the splash is affecting the shape of the liquid, both ways. What does that factor mean? It's affect liquid. So that means the splash will affect the liquid. If you don't want it to affect the liquid, you will bring this to 0. That will change the result of the simulation a little, and it's not as realistic as if you have it 1. If you will use a resimulation, that means you cannot have this. So automatically the program will tell you you can do that. Because we have the velocity now, if we will try to resimulate everything, I will just try to start fresh. Let's resimulate everything. I already activated this. It says the splash simulation cannot affect the liquid in resimulation mode. The affect liquid option is ignored, which is this option. It's ignored now because we have the water, but we cannot have the splash, the new splash created, affecting the water, because the water is already simulated. And see how fast the simulation is, just to have idea about how everything is happening. So now, knowing all these things, let's just jump and start preparing for the water body, and maybe you will render a few passes of the particles to know exactly how we can manage those. I already created 2 shaders. We can create shaders very simple, but a few things I can do now which will allow me to see everything and render. Let's do that.